welcome. We're here in the Whitall Pavilion of the Library of Congress. My name is Steve Winnick, and I'm talking to two musicians who just played a concert for us, Eva Salina and Peter Stan. And so we're going to talk to both of you about your careers. I guess we'll start with Eva just because that's the way we're organized here. And so you are a wonderful singer, and you sing in many different traditions. Let's start just with the real basics, where you were born and raised and how you got started as a singer.
Certainly. I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, California, and my parents are architects and artists and very creative people, but not musicians per se. And I was raised in a rather Luddite household with no television and really rooted in my parents' social life and different culture of art and craft, but very musical. And I had an uncle who played piano, and through him I learned to sing a lot of, from You Are My Sunshine on to, Phil Oakes and the Beatles and the Stones. And it was clear that I was musically inclined. And my grandfather on my father's side all my grandparents were born in the United States, but my great-grandparents had come over on that side from Lithuania and Ukraine and Poland, the Jewish, Ashkenazi Jews. And my grandfather was very invested in my Jewish upbringing. And my mother's not Jewish, and my father is very secular. And so there was a lot of influence and emphasis placed on my participation somehow culturally in Judaism. But my grandfather was sending me recordings of cantorial singers, like these older men. Like there was no inroad for me. There was no way to connect. And so they were still kind of looking, trying to figure things out. And a friend of my dad's gave me a copy of a cassette that had been made in the early 70s in Los Angeles from a spin-off of a group called Amman, which was a big folk ensemble. A lot of people who went on to be ethnomusicologists and scholars and musicians. And they had recorded an album of not exactly klezmer music, but Yiddish songs with instruments, not your standard repertoire. And it was the songs were sung by a relatively young woman at the time. A simple voice with so much integrity. Her name, Pearl Rottenberg at the time was her name. And I taught myself all the songs from the transliterated Yiddish. And my parents were kind of dumbfounded and wanted to encourage me, but didn't really know how. And so they looked around in our local community. As my father says, in Santa Cruz, you get your culture where you find it. So they looked first to see if there was a kind of a klezmer group or someone who could encourage me, but there didn't happen to be. And at the time, it was very early 90s, there was a young woman by the name of Ruth Hunter who had grown up in the kind of folk dance community in Hawaii, but had become very interested in the music. She started an all-woman Bulgarian Bitov ensemble, which I think to this day has not existed in Bulgaria. So she was way ahead of the curve, and just a beautiful musician and full of integrity and undeniably herself, no matter what she did. And I'm so grateful because even though it was a happy accident, I couldn't have asked for a better first teacher.
So you ended up in Balkan music.
So I ended up in Balkan music.
Almost by accident.
By accident, because it was my parents said, "Oh, it's Eastern Europe, like it's kind of similar." And when you're a child, when you hear something, you allow it to resonate without filtration, without an existentialist conversation, without a justification, and you respond so immediately and completely. And my parents, to their great credit, encouraged me at every step of the way. And the timing was particularly good because many people were immigrating to the United States from the Balkans as a result of conflict and political disruption and changes in the cultural systems. So I was able to study directly from that age with amazing singers and instrumentalists alike.
So tell us some of the people that you studied with and what they taught you.
Absolutely. So the first wave that came over that I met of people were mostly Bulgarians. So they included Petrana Kucheva, Tatiana Serbinska, Milen Slavov, Donka Koleva, a whole bunch of Bulgarian musicians. I mean, people like Yuri Unakov, who I met when I was 14, Vasil Bebelekov, a phenomenal gaida player who passed away a little over a year ago, he was the first musician from the Balkans who said, "Come, play with me, come sing with me." He was a Rodop gaida player. I was 12 years old. And it was very deeply affirming to me. So Bulgarian culture was really what I was immersed in the deepest as a child. And I traveled to Bulgaria in 1996 for 6 weeks started to learn to read and write the alphabet and the language, and started to understand the greater context that surrounded the music, which I think was the most valuable part of that trip. And once I came home, I started to expand my interest, and Esma Regipova came for the first time in 1997. I was 13 years old, and beyond her attempt to marry me to her accordion player, who was twice my age, I was able to kind of osmose some of that incredible energy that she had and learn some of the Macedonian Roma songs. I met Merita Halili when I was 14 in New York and had a few lessons with her, and she's since become a very important mentor and a friend. And, so I feel like, often in contrast to the experience I had with perhaps like the older generations of American Balkan music enthusiasts who were skeptical of a child showing up, who resented my access that I had without, just by accident. Within the Balkan community, within the diaspora communities, I always found the most warmth, acknowledgement, and actually the deepest understanding of oral tradition and the necessity of the next generation, who might take your jobs,
Right.
but will keep feeding these songs.
Right.
So.
That's great. And I should say that several of the people you mentioned, Merita Halili and Esma, have been in the same concert series that you just sang in today. So
And
that's
Yuri
nice to know.
Unakov is a National Heritage
Yes,
Fellow
right.
also.
Absolutely. So.
It's going to make it hard to add, so we really shouldn't do this in one shot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to be mindful, can you look at him a little more on this?
I didn't know I almost asked.
Interesting.
Wait, what's going on?
We're only seeing the side of Eva's face
Okay.
because she's looking at you.
So I
Oh.
should move back a tiny bit.
Yeah, that'll make sense.
Okay, sorry, I know. It did occur to me, this is gonna be better.
So I was thinking of bringing Steve out, but
That's going to fix it.
that, okay,
Okay,
cool.
All right.
as we were.
So you had mentioned before the interview, you had mentioned that you sang in a Balkan choir in college. Why don't you talk a little about that experience?
Well, when I was growing up going to Balkan music camp every year in Northern California, the coolest people that I knew were the ethnomusicologists. They were the ones who took the mattresses off the beds, put them on the floor, made Turkish coffee, played music till 3 a.m. I thought, oh, perfect. That's what I want to do. That's going to be my job. And so when it was time to apply to college, I only applied to one school, and that was UCLA for ethnomusicology. And I thought, oh, I'll get to be one of those really happy, adventurous ethnomusicologists. And I quickly, found myself in a building with no windows with people talking about culture, and I just felt so totally disoriented because music had been so integrated into my life on every level. And I was so fortunate. I thought Vasil Bebelekov, who had been one of my mentors, the Bulgarian gaida player, I thought that he would be there, and I showed up and I saw a totally different name listed next to the course. I thought, who is this person? What I didn't know was that Cvetanka Varimezova, who had just been hired, Tim Rice had worked extensively with the Varimezov family, with Ivan Varimezov, with his uncle, Todor Varimezov, who was one of the first official state musicians in Bulgaria. Tim had been working for many years to bring Ivan and Cvetanka over to UCLA. And we both arrived. I was 17. She was, probably in her early 40s and had just moved, not speaking anything, uprooted her family, and we arrived both of us shell-shocked at the same, in the same week to Los Angeles, and I had no idea what a gift that would end up being for me. I didn't pursue academia, but Cvetanka and my studying with her and spending time with her as a choir director, as a musician, as a mother, as a multi-instrumentalist, as a committed educator, and a generous singer. Not only did it reconnect me to Bulgarian music, but it also just solidified my commitment to education and to generous teaching and to cultivating kind of simultaneously my work as an educator and my work as a performer, knowing that the two would nurture each other and that through my work as an educator I could also give back and feed the tradition that had given me so much. Right. Yeah.
Well, one thing that's interesting about your repertoire and what you do is that you not only sing Bulgarian music, but also Macedonian and Serbian, Romani, and to some extent Georgian even.
Yeah.
How do you, well, I mean, first of all, what ties all of those things together for you?
I mean, I think I tell people they're mountain songs. They're all about
Okay.
mountains. They're about water. They're about birds. But, you know, when you start to fall in love with one polyphonic tradition, it's like a virus. You know, it multiplies rapidly within your body. And with the Bulgarian women's choir tradition, it's interesting because it's a bit of an outlier. It's many people's entree into, you know, kind of polyphonic singing traditions. But it's not a naturally occurring form of folk harmony. It's something that's constructed, you know, like Stravinsky, like Bartok, like let's take these melodies and let's expand them, let's make them approachable within the Western harmonic canon. I was very curious when I started to hear, you know, Southern Albanian polyphony and Northern Greek, you know, right in that border area, just the richness and the mystery and the trance and those kind of inexplicable feelings that you have when you're immersed in that sound. And then Georgian music started to be more popular when I was probably in my mid-teens. I started to hear about Georgian music and learn, and Ukrainian. I got to study with Mariana Sadovska and travel in Ukraine when I was 19, and I just started to kind of love all of them and also realize that each voice has so many different facets. You know, just the way there are 20 different reed options on Peter's accordion, you have this ability to explore the spectrum not only of the sounds that you can make, but the parts of yourself that you can express through different traditions. And so for me, it's not about how can I sound like this recording, but what part of myself can I access through this tradition, knowing that like the language is sacred. You really can't mess with the language, and you have your primary allegiance is to the vowels, which dictate everything about how you sing. But you know, I'm hungry and I'm curious, and you know, I'm also the YouTube generation, where we were able to just get lost, just click a link and see where you end up, and you know, I mean, that's been incredibly valuable for me. And also, I was 14. There was this thing called Napster.
Right.
I would type in, I mean, my mom was like, what are you doing? Like, the computer just keeps getting full. And I would type in any Albanian word that I knew and just download everything. And, you know, maybe I'd find one good song out of 500. But it was just that kind of curiosity. And, you know, I find that the songs are as relevant and connected to each other as you are to them. And it's about how you contextualize the songs within your life too, how they're relevant. Like, it's not for anybody to decide what you're able to love, who you're able to love, and so I think that those affinities, like it's the same muscles, just doing these like mildly. The way the melisma changes from one to the other is endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, but I mean, one question is, do you find yourself applying techniques from one tradition to songs from another?
I have an undeniably Bulgarian accent, I think, in like everything I do. I mean, the Macedonians make fun of me. I don't know. You probably think I have a Bulgarian accent, but I figure like, okay, if I'm in the Balkans, it's much better to have a Bulgarian accent than an American accent.
Right.
You know,
That's
like,
true.
and I mean, I grew up in Santa Cruz. I grew up in California. The state majority of California was Spanish speaking. By the time I was 16 years old, I was fluent in Spanish at that age also. Like, I've always been interested in opening new channels of communication. And so language, and whether it's a musical language or a spoken language, you know, with Spanish, it was about being able to be part of my community, my greater community where I lived. And learning the different pieces of languages from the Balkans was about being able to facilitate collaboration and interaction and continue to learn that way by being able to ask questions.
I have to say, just to interrupt you,
Please.
I remember you coming in our neighborhood where the Balkans are, and they would ask me, who's this woman? And she's from, they heard us speak, and they try to figure her out. They're like, she's from Bulgaria, right? I'm like, no, she's from California. And they're like, yeah, right, come on. They were telling us a few of the people. Remember that Romanian accordion player?
Of course.
Goes, no way, she's not from America. Like, because she sang the words, and her style was so good, so close, that they were like really surprised.
Yeah.
When I showed up to the first Macedonian Roma wedding that I went to in the Bronx, I was wearing my prom dress from high school because it was like the only appropriate garment that I had. But everybody thought I was Albanian because I was clearly like, I mean, you know, not Roma, and
Yeah.
I knew all the dances, and I understood kind of the cultural language of the way the line works, and but clearly, like, I am not of, but I am not of in this certain way. It's an odd position to be in. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to navigate, but I think it's what it requires is your confidence in your own participation, and also just knowing who your mentors are, and who you give authority to is very, very powerful. And not everybody has earned the authority. A lot of people will give it to themselves, but
Actually, I got a question. I've never asked you out. When I've told my friends this, like, when you're around Balkans, I see you change your personality. So, like, you change like a Balkan.
like I'm more polite.
No, you're acting like, because Balkans have this certain personality, so your Balkan changes like as a Balkan. So are you like, how do you do that? Like, I can't explain, like figure of speech or just nods, you know, like simple things you do.
I mean, for me,
I've never told you this, but I've told my friends, like, she can even act like, you know, like the personality.
I mean, I think it's that thing. It's like you speak a different language. When you're speaking Spanish, like someone says, as many languages as you speak, that's how many people you are. And the thing I was saying, you learn different traditions, you expand your identity. It's like I would say when I'm around you, and you know, if I'm around like a more what you call the Balkans, then it's not about not being myself, but it's about being a version of myself that I feel like is respectful within
But
like,
it looks
that
like you
culture.
do it naturally, like you just.
I've been doing it since I was a little kid. You know, that's the thing. It's like I think I have to often tell people that, like, it's not like I heard this music in college.
Right.
Like it was,
Right.
and there are things about me, like sensibilities, like ideas that I have about, you know, what to do when somebody dies. Like even if you're not close to them, even if they're not your family, if it's driving distance, you go and you show up. And that's not necessarily something that I learned from my family. Mm-hmm. That's something very much that I learned from communities of immigrants, diaspora communities that support each other in a totally different way. You know, and so I think that there's like, it kind of goes both ways. It's like I've observed a lot, and I try to be really respectful of those environments and work in a way that respects that. But then also, like, I am influenced deeply by a lot of these cultural principles.
Interesting. Yeah, it's what I guess a lot of ethnographers would call code,
Code
switching,
switching,
but on a
yeah.
deeper level that's involving more than language and all the other behaviors. Yeah, so it's really interesting.
I mean, I know that one thing that I do is when I'm speaking to people that speak, like, say, a Slavic language and they're speaking English, I will change my syntax.
Yeah.
I won't take on a Slavic language, but I'll start constructing my sentences based on my understanding of Slavic languages so that I'm speaking English the way they speak English so that we actually just understand each other better. And it's not about dumbing anything down as much as it's just about, let me speak to you the way you're speaking to me so that we understand each other.
So another kind of, identity element that bubbles through this music is gender. A lot of people, as you said, their entree into this music would be those Bulgarian choirs, which are kind of a state-run thing sometimes and different from the folk tradition. But the other kind of Balkan music that some Americans would know would be the kind of big brass band, the big bouncy band that you guys have both been in together. And those are very male in their energy.
You think?
In many ways. So how does that affect what you do as a duo, but also how you've come to be a performer?
Well, I think that's one area in which I don't act very Balkan. I mean, I think that it's, especially when I'm working as a band leader or when I'm producing my own album, I have very strong opinions. I know, I want people to be themselves. At the same time, if there are structural things that I need, I was raised to assert myself and to be able to articulate what's important to me. And it definitely subverts a lot of gender paradigms. And when we made the Shaban Bayramovic album, which I recorded here and then also in Serbia, I was singing these deeply gendered songs by this archetypal male voice. And I wanted to make a tribute, but I didn't want to make a tribute to a female singer initially because I felt like the lines of comparison would have been so direct. And everybody would have just been like, well, she doesn't sound like so-and-so. I was like, well, that's clearly actually not the point. But I knew that, like, in taking on Shaban's repertoire, gender was the first thing, and many other things would have to be so totally transformed. There was no way you could possibly compare me to him. And so that was this, it was like I just kind of had this, like, get-out-of-jail-free card to just start to transform stuff. And I also didn't change the language. So I kept the language deeply gendered. It's all in Romanesque, so like a Serbian audience, unless they speak Romanesque, they're not going to understand what's going on. But the one word that I changed was I changed the word referring to someone as my woman. I changed it to my wife. Because I didn't, like, it just didn't sit right for me to say my woman. It's just like, well, it kind of made me have those wrong shivers. But someone said to me, someone who's like pretty reputable and works a lot with Roma musicians in Europe said, you know, well, aren't you afraid that people are going to think you're a lesbian? Like, let them wonder. Like, curiosity is what leads to people shifting their consciousness and expanding their worlds. And like, if I can play a very small part in that, like, that's a significant contribution. Like, yeah, make people confused. Confusion leads to curiosity, you know? And so that was like, that subversion felt really important to me. But then when Peter and I were gonna make this album, I thought, let's find those female voices that never, because of this very strict gender structure, never got to exist outside of that pretty narrow sphere. Let's try to bring those voices into different arenas, if we can, through what we do, new audiences, new places. And so, like, working with Vida's repertoire, which was, I think, equally written for accordion and voice, so it gives us both breathing room. It's not just like, okay, Peter's gonna play something like hunky-dory and I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna sing this like killer song. It's deeply a conversation. Then I was, you know, I mean, I had some ideas about form, but it was mostly like we had to record it live because you couldn't really do it any other way. And the songs were very different because it's Peter. Very different every time. I'd be like, Peter, just do it like you did it before. He's like, I can't remember what I did last time. But I loved like how fresh and present and in the moment. And Peter was born in, I'll let him talk about himself, but like Peter being born in diaspora and then growing up in New York City, there's a much different cultural structure, and there's a lot of cultural information in terms of influencing the way.
I just have to say, like, about like changing it. I remember when I was to Serbia, took some lessons. I was hanging out with some of the great accordion players. One of them that passed away, but he's a legend. His name was Perica Gula. So I remember, like, I asked him, show me that. He could never play the same piece over again. He wouldn't never remember. So they have some guys who are so amazing, masters, and they just cannot repeat what they played.
That's interesting, yeah.
And I always felt like that was like the most exciting thing to me, and that was a big generational difference in terms of how I encountered the music in the American Balkan scene. Is that oftentimes in the early years, people would have one recording of how someone sang a song on one day, and that would become canon.
Yeah.
And it was like, you must recreate and reproduce that song that way. And I love it when I hear, someone sing the song 5 times, rather than like transcribe them in this prescriptive way. Say, okay, so here's the vocabulary, here's the palette.
Here's the spectrum, yeah.
Yeah. And so just to dovetail back and just finish that thought about the gender stuff, we had an experience where we brought a Serbian trumpet player who was in town 2 years ago. We brought him into the studio to play a bit on the album. And he's from southern Serbia, and Vida was from the north, and there are different musical languages. But I was asking him to kind of play along. We were recording a few songs thinking, okay, we could maybe play some gigs together. We have a little demo. And he didn't really know the songs very well. And I had learned the melody, like the instrumental melody, like to the T, and I was singing it for him. And he would look at Peter, who's gonna play it every time. It's like, I'm a singing teacher. Like, you want me to sing something dependably, like 10 times in a row for you so you can learn it? Like, I can do that for you. That's my job. But it was like, I would sing the melody to him, and he would look at Peter. And it was like, it just kept going passed around, and then Peter was being deferential to him because he's from Serbia and he's like such a master and didn't want to like tell him like do it this way. But I thought, this may be the first time that this guy has ever received musical direction from a woman. And clearly he was deflecting it. It's like it was so foreign to him. Yeah. And it was like, it was very uncomfortable for me at the same time. It was like, sorry, like at the end of the session, like the money's coming from my pocket into your hand. Like, we're trying to get this clean. We don't have 3 days to find a new version of the song. Like, this is it. We gotta, gotta kind of nail it. And it was very frustrating for me.
Were you able to rein him in finally?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, but it was just like, I'm kind of used to it. I mean, we were flown to Serbia to play in this festival in a concert honoring Shaban Bajramovic, and it was like anytime I would ask a question, like when is sound check, I would get it's okay, sweetie. Like, I asked you a really simple question, like, this is a yes or no. Like, are we having sound check? It's okay. We didn't have sound check. But I think there's that kind of, I don't travel without a man now in Serbia because it's not about my ability to articulate what I need, but it's about needing those conversations to happen in a different gendered space. And I'm not here to like upend everything. Like, I don't need to like, destroy the feast table. But, I definitely like I love my friendship with Peter where we give each other a hard time. I think we learn something from each other.
I think that is what happened. It's because the way the Roma system in Europe is years ago, everyone would just get together and play. They wouldn't play, the Roma especially, they wouldn't keep to the track, like the way it's supposed to be on track. They would always add something or add some extra harmony or do their feelings. Like I remember one of the famous accordion players when he's world famous now. Like he's still around. His name is Ionica Minune. Mm-hmm. He's in Bucharest, Romania. So when he came here years ago, he told me I wasn't. Now everyone's going wild for me, but years ago I wasn't allowed to play on TV because besides the politics of Roma, like just his style of playing, it wasn't straight. So because of that, he wasn't allowed to play on TV. But now everyone's begging him to like come all around.
That's great.
So it just like changed.
Yeah. Well, another thing I wanted to mention, just a couple more things for Eva before we talk to Peter in more depth. But you've done what would be called ethnographic field work. You're as you said, you didn't pursue the academic track, but you're doing that along the way as part of your learning process. So where have you gone and who have you worked with in that?
I mean, I've been lucky to meet a lot of people here in the States. And I've also, one of the things that's a little funny is it's like I've learned a lot by actually collaborating with people, not necessarily having like a very strict teacher-student relationship. And that's, it definitely flies in the face a little bit of like the proper methodology as outlined by so-and-so in 1940, whatever, but I've always been somebody who learned by doing. I've never been somebody who kind of like isolated themselves in a room and practiced. I always wanted, music always felt like something that needed to be made with people. But through different projects, I've been able to travel. Like I never got like a Fulbright, or I never kind of went those routes. But I've done, some artist residencies, some intercultural collaborative, through One Beat with the Department of State. Did that project here in 2012. I went to Istanbul in 2016. I traveled in Turkey. I've traveled in Bulgaria. I've worked in learned in villages. I've been in Ukraine on a research trip when I was younger, but with a group, but always kind of learned in the context of the group, and then tried to kind of isolate the things that I felt like I needed as an individual outside of that work. So, I learn a lot from listening, honestly. Like deep listening over and over and over and over and over to singers who aren't with us anymore. I mean, one of the things in Bulgaria, for example, that is tricky is that there's a whole conservatory movement. And so there's kind of a sound that comes out of conservatory that doesn't have that regional specificity. And when I was younger, I'd been presented like, this is the model by one teacher. Like, this is the model. This is what you have to sound like. It was nothing like my actual voice, which is a much deeper sound. And then when I discovered these singers, Nadezhda Khvoyneva, for example, from the Rhodops, for this like deep, rich, soulful voice. You have to kind of find your spirit animal in any tradition, like a voice that you can resonate with, so that you're not putting on a mask, but you're finding those frequencies that you share. And that's been really, really important to me, to be able to find those people, and also, working collaboratively with people, and you realize that you both have something to share with each other. And meeting as peers, I think you actually learn a lot more, because you learn about yourself, and you learn through kind of communicating with Google Translate and like hand gestures and lots of frustration, but you end up having totally different conversations than like you or I would have, because there's so much effort involved in communicating. So I think I try to stay hungry and stay curious. And I learn a lot from people who are not professional musicians too, from people who just sing, just to sing. And that's actually that's something that I'm very interested in now, is finding those amongst us who, like, particularly in Roma communities, might have wanted to be singers but weren't allowed due to gender stuff, due to family structure, but still sang and still gave their musicality to their children. I was in Serbia recording the horns for the Shaban album, and there was one woman who was the mother of the tuba player, like kind of one of the best tuba players in the scene. We were recording in his house in the middle of winter, and she was sitting in the room with the old stove and just kind of like looking at me in that way, the gaze, it just goes totally through you into the next room and back again. And for 3 days, she just observed me. And then on the last day, she said, "Uba volpeš," like, you sing beautiful. And then she proceeded to tell me her whole story about how she'd wanted to be a singer her whole life, and how her father had not let her, but she had always sung whatever factory she was working in, whatever. And then she started singing, and we were like, it was like the female voice of the ghost of Shaban Bayramovic. I mean, we were stunned, and we pulled her into the studio, and we recorded her singing. And we recorded 3 or 4 songs, and her whole family gathered around her. And it's like they saw their grandmother. She became this matriarch that was so elevated. And she recorded these songs. And I think because she had been through being a bride, being a mother, and then being a grandmother, there was a certain power that she had, this kind of crone power that settled into, that made it a safe space for her to be musical. And, I learned so much from just listening to those recordings of those 3 songs, so much about phrasing, about letting the character of your person enter your singing. And what we didn't know when we recorded her is that she'd been waiting for a kidney transplant for like months and months and months and months. And she was actually in a very tenuous position health-wise. And when we found that out, we made a really quick mix down. We like slathered it with reverb and delay so that she would feel like she was in an 80s bar and be totally happy. And we sent back these recordings of her to her family, and she passed away about 6 months later. And it reminds me of actually my friend and a friend of the Library of Congress, Jason Hamaker, who went to Syria to do this field work. You're just doing the work because you love it and you're interested, and you kind of end up doing something that has meaning far beyond just like your folly. Right. Like, the fact that we made these recordings that this family now has of their beloved grandmother who probably died in her early 50s. Generations are really short there, you know, like those are the kind of things, that's the kind of unintentional, it's like I didn't go there to have that happen, but did that make the whole trip worthwhile? Of course.
Right.
That brings a flashback when we were all sitting together and we were just playing. She was just watching, but I felt her hunger, like that she just wanted to sing. She couldn't wait to get a chance to do, even though it was just us. She couldn't wait to. You seen her face light up, like she just couldn't wait to sing. It's a shame she wasn't a singer.
Or she didn't sing more also at that time, but
So
you do what you can. You know?
Exactly. So I think now, like for me, if I'm going to think about doing something along the lines of field work, it's about all these hidden singers. You know, I've been working recently in Turkey with people from different communities, like the way that women hold cultural identity, the way that women, especially when populations or families are displaced, in the home, carry, like, literally embody that knowledge of who you are and where you come through food, through story, through song, and yet would those people call themselves performers? No. Would they call themselves musicians? No. Are they deeply musical? Deeply, deeply musical.
And that's a project that you're working on with the State Department, right?
Yeah. We, as alumni of a state exchange programs, which is One Beat, we were eligible to apply for different projects, and one of the subjects was, you know, voices, like kind of amplifying voices of women and girls. And one of my friends in Turkey he's the 17th son of a Kurdish woman from Eastern Turkey. She was 81 at the time, and he was so inspired by her for all those reasons that I articulated, and wanted to make a film about her. And we started talking about it. We said, well, how many women are there like that? From how many different, you know, I mean, Turkey being such an incredibly diverse place. And so we've been fortunate, you know, with the support of the State Department to go, and we have interviewed like 12 different women, and of course we'd love to continue the work in different parts of Turkey, you know, in the Black Sea but those stories are, you know, it's the extraordinary, ordinary story.
And one last thing for you, which is about your teaching, because you mentioned, you know, that you can repeat things over and over as a teacher, but also you mentioned listening so closely as a learner. So how does your learning and your teaching, you know, inform each other? I
mean, constantly, of course, but I think, you know, one of the things for me that I believe deeply is that it is very important that traditional music be performed in the place of its origin, because that's when that's the closest to the source. There isn't the separation. But given the shifts of population and culture and the kind of dissolution of traditional life, I argue that it's just important that this music be sung, period. And it kind of is not so important who does it, as long as people continue to do it. So the thrill for me is to bring the sounds and the textures and the harmonies into the mouths and the ears and the bodies of people that might not encounter it otherwise. And so, like, I just finished half of a semester teaching at New York University in the experimental theater wing, where I'm working with these phenomenal young actors, and I give them a way and a context to experience their voices, abstracted somehow through language, putting them in unfamiliar positions where they can actually uncover and discover totally new parts of themselves and be deeply inspired to integrate these new harmonic principles into their own composition. You know, so that's one of those things where it's like, know how to do something in a very traditional way. Don't screw up the words. And know that, you know, as long as you know what you're changing, as long as you're making informed decisions, you know, then you're actually contributing something. And so I learned so much about singing by teaching, because having to articulate what I'm doing and refine that ability to model and also transmit is so important. At the same time, something that I've done a few times that's been perhaps the most gratifying of all is to work with children in diaspora communities who don't necessarily have access to learning within their tradition, because oftentimes dance is the way that people are able to kind of casually participate. And, you know, instruments are something that are put on the wall, like a relic of a place that you once were. And it's hard for people to, you know, for kids especially, to just casually interact with traditional instruments. But like in 2011, for example, a friend of mine, Sonia Yasharowska, in the part of the Macedonian Roma community in the Bronx, she wanted to put on an event for her own community. She wanted, you know, to raise education, because there's a lack of education within different elements of the Roma community that actually end up perpetuating negative stereotypes, but you know, inadvertently somehow. So she wanted to put on an event that would raise awareness within her community, and she did it on International Roma Day, and she wanted some children to perform, but she couldn't find someone in her community to teach them older songs. And so she asked me to come, and I called them my cupcakes. There were these little girls. They're all like grown up and scary now, but they were like, you know, 10, 11, and I taught them like old songs from Esma, songs from, you know, like songs from that had been recorded in the 60s and 70s. And they performed, accompanied by, you know, doumbek and clarinet. They performed for their community, and I had been going to events, weddings and circumcision parties and things like that, and I never told people that I was a musician. I always just showed up. I was like Sanka's friend. I was dancing. I was respectful. But the way that I introduced myself to that community was by teaching their children to sing and standing behind their children, not singing,
Right.
but shepherding them kind of back into the language, back into the music. And for me, like that was such an important moment. And they were like coming up to me saying, "We didn't know you did that." I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's kind of my thing, you know." But
Excellent.
because it happens in many communities that you're working so hard just to integrate into where you are that you don't necessarily you can't transmit the language to your kids, or you keep the language a secret language, which was what happened with Yiddish in my family and many other families.
My parents kept it.
They kept
The
Romanes
Yeah.
from you?
Well, my parents, when they only spoke secrets, they would speak Romanes.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing. Well,
Thank you.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
clearly,
a great segue.
clearly I care
your
about
story.
all these things.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue to
Yeah,
your childhood.
yeah.
So where were you born, and what community were you part of?
Well, my parents come from Serbia, Banat. Then they went to Australia, where I was born, and my brother. And I was there till 11 years old. Then we never visited no family, no one. In Serbia, we never, till age 11, I never visited no grandparents. I was always in Australia. First time I came to America, and on my mother's side, the whole family was here. The cousins, uncles, my grandma, grandpa. And it was kind of weird, because my dad played accordion, and my brothers played accordion. And we came here and everyone was playing accordion or violin. So it was kind of like, why are they doing the same thing we're doing? It was unusual. The reason my dad he teaches accordion, because when he grew up poor in the village, a Roma family, so he never had an accordion, so he played all these wind instruments. So when he got older, he bought his own accordion, and then when he wanted to make sure we all have accordions to learn it.
So it's one of those things where the parent wants their children to have
right.
the thing they were deprived of.
It was kind of like, because he didn't have it, he wanted to make sure his kids have it. So it was kind of, I remember growing up, kind of crazy in the house, like four accordions, like everyone would play in a different room, and then we would play together, and then argue about music. Then like I would tell him it's no good, he would tell me, and then we would compete. I'm jumping ahead, I'm sorry.
But yeah, but so it was mostly within the family though. You didn't have a big Serbian Roma community that you were part of there, or did you?
In Queens, it was a big,
So once you came to the U.S.,
there was a big community, and every week there was christenings or weddings.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of great music. Then years back, they brought also musicians from Europe, from Serbia. They would get visas then.
Right.
So what was important, the vocalist. It was great having musicians, but the vocalist was the most important. Like having a great vocalist. I have to say, in the first time I played in a few bands, not playing it with no vocalist was kind of unusual. I'm like, what do you mean there's no vocalist? It was unusual growing up, like always focusing on the vocalist.
Yeah. Interesting. So what kind of ensembles were there playing? I mean, what kind of groups?
It was
around?
keyboard, playing rhythm or bass, and violin, accordion, and a vocalist, and percussion. That was the main. That's kind of the instrumentation, basic wedding music in Serbia.
Were there string bands too, though? Like brach and like more like.
Yeah, but not in Queens. My grandpa played in Serbia. They had that. My grandpa played the brach, and there was a lot of strings. But over here, everyone just played accordion, violin, accompaniment.
Interesting. I mean, it depends what cities you go to. I guess in the U.S., there's a lot of brach and those instruments as
If
well,
you go
but not
to
in,
Queens,
not there.
if you go to Queens, Ridgewood, where I live, everyone plays accordion there or violin now,
Nice.
or keyboard. Those three instruments are the main instruments. You've seen
And
that.
is that like mostly people from Banat, or
Yeah,
like
for the
because
Banat, Serbia.
maybe that's because there's more of the Romanian influence? You think?
Well,
Because like if you go like say you go to like where Vida lived,
right,
there were lots of like more like the Serbian kind of string, even
right,
for Roma
but that's
stuff.
because we come from Banat, but they're from Srem, so that's a different part of Serbia. That's where my wife's from, where Vida's from. They do a lot of the guitar,
Right.
the what do you call it, the
Tambura.
tambura, yeah.
Yeah. It tends to get called tamburica music here in
Tamburica,
the,
yeah. So in Srem, that's the, every like seafood, fish restaurants, and tamburica and wine. That's every restaurant has that.
Yeah.
Well, that was like Vida and Shaban both. Like sometimes they would record like with a more like violin and accordion kind of rig, or sometimes they would have a string band, or sometimes like with Shaban he would record with a brass band. So they kind of like
Right, but
hit all
Shaban was a different
well,
style.
he's from the south.
Yeah.
Right,
He's
yeah.
a different style.
But he's still kind of like I feel like he liked those different textures.
When I performed, he was because we went on. Actually, we performed in Washington. I don't even remember
Okay.
where.
And and you were his accordionist
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that time.
We performed in New York, Washington. I'm trying to think where we performed here, but it was so long ago. But he was telling me we took the train here, and he was telling me so many amazing stories of his lifestyle, and he told me, "Well, I'm different. I can sing from all the areas, and I can speak accent like everyone."
Well, and yeah, when I was writing down the lyrics for his songs, sometimes he would speak like 3 different dialects of Romanes, like in one live recording.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, where are we? Like, what city are we in now?
So he was able to do many styles.
So you actually underwent sort of classical accordion training as well at some point. Yeah. So what was your education?
Well, I went. It was Dr. Jacob Newpower. So I started off with my parents, the family, learning Roman music, and then my first to all Roma, they're like, "That's not right, learning just Roman music. You have to go to school and learn music, to read music." So my father was very strict about that. He sent me to a conservatory in Queens. So I went to that, and then after a while, I felt like I needed something more. So then I went to, I was looking all around, and then accordion, you couldn't really find accordion schools. Like, who teaches accordion? So I finally found in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. His name was Dr. Jacob Newpower. So then he used to have some kind of Dr. Jacob Newpower conservatory, like a college or something. So he said, I'm not doing that no more, but you can come to my house and we'll do some serious accordion lessons.
How old were you?
When I done that?
Yeah.
Probably like 17 or 18. So I used to play in a kafana, what's a Serbian bar, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I would play starting at 9, go to 3 or 4 in the morning. And then on the weekends then we didn't have the carry bags. It was the old-fashioned.
Right, the box, yeah.
Yeah, the box. It was, all I remember was so bad getting there. I would take a train, go to Port Authority, take a bus. From there, I would take 2 trains and a bus to go all the way to his house. It was a trip.
But you ended up learning a lot of
So then
the principles, yeah.
He helped me like learn music, read music, and also the Trenton accordion school in Westmont, New Jersey. Stanley Darrow and Joanne Arnold. So I used to go there. Then I used to go to the school over there. And so I would spend 2-3 days over there.
Interesting.
Every week I would do that. Go to Port Authority. And I think I was kind of a nut.
Well, sometimes you have to be. That's a lot of people in the various traditional musics go through that phase where they just have to learn every tune or every technique, yeah. So you ended up playing in a lot of styles, though. I mean, I've seen you in klezmer groups and other things. So how did you get into all the different communities?
Well, all I played was, for years I just stayed in the community. I knew no one out the community. Then someone I don't even remember who it was. Someone introduced me with a person called Harold Seletsky, who done klezmer music. I remember him ringing my bell in the basement as I was practicing. And it was so unusual for someone to ask me to play music that's outside of my world. So we went to a gig, it was called the West End Gate. He goes, let's try, see what happens. Then I was still learning music. I wasn't a great fast reader. So I said, okay, I'll come. We done the gig, and I'm playing, and some of the klezmer music was like Romanian music and Roman music.
Right.
So I'm like, hey, it's pretty close, some of the stuff. So the music is in front of me, but then I wasn't a good reader, so I'm kind of using my ear, and
I like how you say ears and you move your hands.
But I'm playing and I'm trying to read the music and I'm not keeping up, so I'm just depending on my ear. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm really messing this gig up. So at the end of the gig, I was thinking, I can't wait to finish the gig because I'm embarrassed, I'm not reading the music. At the end of the gig, he goes, I want you to please play with me every Sunday at the West End Gate. So we ended up, it was called West End Gate, the restaurant, and it was Harold Seletsky and the West End Klezmorum.
Nice.
So for years, I ended up playing with him.
That's the one up on 112th
12th Street, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. That's where we started.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, how old were you then?
I lost track.
Come on, I mean, were you in your 20s?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
You're an old man now.
Yeah, so I remember like when I was about to finish the gig, he's never gonna call me again.
Right.
And at the same time, I felt like I wasn't doing a good job, so I said I can't wait to finish. But he said it was great. I want you to do this and be in a band. So
Right.
we ended up being together.
great.
And that opened the doors to many doors.
Yeah.
Once I done that, many doors opened.
Yeah. So what other things did you end up doing?
Well, many different bands. I started learning some French music, some Italian music, and just opened different gigs. I play with Slavic Soul Party, the
Right.
brass band.
Right.
Yeah, and just many different bands, some klezmer bands. I also have my band that we do perform, not as much, but my family band.
Right. Oh yeah, sure, yeah. And you've also been in some film music, right? You've done a few
Yeah.
film projects.
Well, I've done some. I've done some acting in some movies
Yeah, yeah.
also. Yeah, with James Earl Jones.
Right. Yeah.
Was called on the QT, and James Alexander. He was the director of another movie.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm a little acting in the movies.
Couple of
Wasn't
different
really
things.
my cup of tea, but it was fun.
Excellent. So how did you come together with Eva? Was it in a brass band, right?
Yeah, with Slavic Soul Party, our first gig was Barbès. Was it Barbès? Yeah.
But then we went on a tour. We went on a tour like all through the Midwest, like driving crazy,
I
and that was when
remember
we
that.
were like in the back room. I think it was in Minneapolis at the
That was
Cedar
a
Cultural Center, and it was like we just started like, do you know this tune? Do you know this tune? Do you
Yeah, I
know this
remember
tune? Like,
backstage. I would always be. Remember that? I would always be taking
yeah.
an accordion and is this guy a nut? He's never leaves the accordion.
you
So
are
then-
a nut. We know.
And then she would start singing, and we started to know each. I'm like, how do you know this song? It was a connection. We made a good connection.
And how did you decide to sort of peel off from the bigger band and become a duo?
Well, first it was a band, right? First we had
Well, I stopped singing with Slavic Soul
Right.
Party in like 2011, and then I was trying to put together a band of my own, like to
Right.
make this album and kind of do something a little bit different. And Peter was like, Peter's like at the top of the list, always. And because the thing is, it's like if we're working with like jazz musicians or like people who are coming from a different background, like there's a lot of intuitive stuff that just like it's not they're thinking about it, they're reading charts, and it's like for us it was just like an understanding, like it was just things were more natural.
But we started off with after Slavic Soul Party, we started with a trumpet. What was it?
like trumpet,
Tuba,
and
drums.
drums. But it was also like it was really stressful for me because I was trying to like lead the band and be the front person in the band, and like working with a bunch of people who like just were not so connected to like song form. Like you have got to remember how many verses this thing has. It's like I don't want to tell the story 1.5 times. Like I'd like to just build my arc and then end it, And so Peter, like doesn't always pay attention to the words, but like he remembers how many verses there are, and like when I tell him to pay attention to the words, then he plays these like deeply soulful, very sensitive things. And so I think just like the logistics of the music industry kind of made that decision for us too, of like, let's not just, toil over these $50 gigs on a weeknight in New York City. Let's actually concentrate our efforts and not, like, as I think like for me, doing just all the nuts and bolts of organizing tours and concerts and stuff like that, it's so demanding. And I knew like when Peter and I play together, that I don't have to worry about what's going to happen when we're on stage. Like I trust him so much to just be musical and be present that like I don't have to be stressed out about the actual music. And like for me, I mean, beyond just being not stressed out about the music, I'm also just challenged constantly to be more musical and be more present and more playful, and like we get along. It's like easy. We fit in one car.
You trust me.
Well, it's taken a few years, but
Well, and another thing to mention is, starting out in one of those Balkan brass bands, and then even peeling it down to some more brass players, you still have that, male energy dominating, and this is very balanced with the two of you. So.
I think so. I mean, I'm pretty bossy, and he's like lets me boss him around. I don't tell him how to play accordion, but
As you see, I'm not a great talker, but
you're a great talker.
Well,
You're doing a great job. Yeah.
I do better musically than my talking.
So one question is, what were you two trying to convey with this concert? I mean, one thing that we noticed in in promoting it was that you were specific that you wanted it to be called Serbian Romani music. So talk about that a little bit.
I mean, like,
Well,
what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I mean, the tunes are from Vida Pavlović, and right there it's the heart of, Vida Pavlović is the heart of Roma Serbian. She's the king, queen.
And Shaban's the king,
Yeah.
arguably, yeah. Well, I think, there are kind of more like nationalist folklore movements that want to separate, like, this is Serbian music and this is Roma music from Serbia. And so, like, for me, the most accurate thing is to acknowledge it in the more holistic way. Like, this is Serbian Roma music. It's not Bulgarian Roma music. It's not Serbian. It's not only Roma. Like, the influence is mutual, and the identity is complex. And the identity is Serbian and it's Roma. And so, for me, it's like, as a non-Roma person, the representation is super, super important to me. Self-representation and also cultural representation. It's like, Peter is really like, I say Serbian Romanian Roma because it's this border area. Like, Peter's family was from Serbia, but he spoke Romanian at home.
Yeah,
So it's like,
at home we grew up speaking Romanian, and later when we came to the U.S., that's when we learned Romani with my family members. But with my parents in Australia, we never.
and then you learned
Romani.
Serbian when you got married, right? More, like.
Yeah, actually, I learned Serbian a lot when singers would come from Serbia.
Interesting.
And on the jobs, I remember one Romani singer came and I had to accompany him, and he looked at me, and he's gonna accompany me. He didn't hear me play, and I was really working to learn all his repertoire. I really got it down good. He was kind of mad, like I didn't speak at that time. I didn't speak Serbian, so he was speaking to me Serbian. He was Roma also. He didn't know I was a Roma, spoke Roma. And then he heard me play. He goes, then he was like really impressed. He told me from all the bands, I was the best accompanist for him all over the U.S. He was really happy. Yeah.
Right.
And I think, like, in our partnership, in terms of like the kind of repertoire that we do, like, I always think, like, in any collaboration, like, yeah, I mean, do I love singing Albanian music and Bulgarian music? Yeah, totally. But like with Peter, I want to hang out where Peter exemplifies, Peter embodies this tradition that I also love. And so I'm not going to ask Peter to be something that he's not. Like, so I can shapeshift a little bit, and just kind of expand into that region and learn more, about that.
Yeah, about that, like, that reminds me, like, growing up in Queens, where we have the Albanians, the Romanians, Serbians. We have all the Balkans. So I remember after the war, because I would play for everyone, so I would go play for the Bosnians, and I would play a song from the Serbian side, because I didn't know how to separate. I just grew up, it's Yugoslavia or Balkan, it's all one music. I put it in one category. So then some people, some of them really got offended. They came up and then there was a whole thing, and he didn't do it on purpose. He's just...
Whereas me, sometimes, like, if we get hired, we were hired once with Slavic Soul Party to play for like a very Serbian event, and I was singing, we were doing a Roma song that had been also recorded in Serbian, but it was like totally a Roma song, and I sang the first verse in Serbian, and everybody sang along, and then I switched into Romanes in the second verse, and all these people coming up, like, pounding their chests, and I was like, let's be real, let's acknowledge, like, this, yes, and,
right.
And so like, for me, I'm not interested in kind of playing into any different hand politically. I think I used to wish when I was a kid in particular, like, trying to make sense of all this, like, I wish I could say, like, actually I have a great grandmother from this country, like, to like legitimize myself in this, most direct way. And then I realized that actually on some level there was a certain agency, we can call it privilege, privilege is a really popular word, that I had of not being overtly affiliated with one like linguistic, religious, territorial, geographic obligation. Like I could move more freely within everybody. And I, if that is a privilege that I have, like I try to do it with great respect, but I'm not going to sing a song that's been co-opted to, commemorate this one victory against this one person, because that victory is someone else's terrible tragedy that they're still mourning. And so I kind of distance myself from the parts of repertoire that have been really polarizing.
I remember when I used to play in the kafana as a child, a youngster, so they would come up and complain. So as I was learning the different styles, I had to separate it to know what not to play, but I was thinking to myself, it's a nice song. I know 2 years ago you liked that song. Now you're against it.
Yeah, that's really weird how how global events will then affect. Yeah.
But I think like we've found too, like sometimes older generations who have more of like an embedded memory of a time when people shared repertoire more, they're kind of they're maybe in a different like intellectual position too in terms of how they conceive of all of it, and they still can appreciate. Like their identity is something that is not based on more divisive political maneuvers, and really like they can say, my identity is complex. Like I grew up in Yugoslavia, I live in modern day Serbia, and I love Macedonian songs.
Right. So I got a special request from an accordionist who is in the audience to ask you about your accordion, because it's not the typical accordion that you see Balkan musicians play.
Right.
So what can you tell me about your Guarini?
Well, the Guarini, this one, most accordions have 120 bass. This one has 140, which it has an extra row of bass notes. Let me just explain it real fast. The first 3 rows are all bass notes. 120 standard accordion has 2 rows of only bass notes. So this has 3 rows of bass notes. Then it's got the regular major chords, minor chords, and 7th, and so on. This is an old Guarini. I have it for about more than 20 years. An accordion like this, you can't find it no more.
It's a beautiful instrument.
Yeah. They make them now. They started making them, but it's the sound. You cannot get this quality no more. It's Guarini. It's a powerful instrument, and a lot of the Balkans in Serbia play the Guarinis, accordions.
Interesting.
People try to buy that instrument from you a lot too, huh?
Yeah, but I would never sell this.
But we should tell that to the TSA people that make you like take it apart in order to put it on a plane. Like, do you understand what you're dealing with?
This accordion has been all around. I mean, even on a plane. Actually, it's been once in the cockpit on a smaller plane with the pilot.
All right.
He was being nice. They said I remember they said if you play Happy Birthday for the pilot, we'll let you put the accordion on.
All right.
Peter's really good at getting people to be nice to him with his accordion.
Cool. Well, I guess we have one last question, which is, what are your next steps as a duo, but also any projects you have in the works?
Always to grow and learn more repertoire and be better and better.
That's a worthy goal. Yeah.
I think like together we've thought about starting to work more in Romanian music. I think there are a lot of really powerful women singers from Romania, and I love that stuff. Peter loves that stuff, and like so many of the songs we sing, not very many people are performing that repertoire. So just like I think for me, it's like you have a sourdough starter in your fridge, and it looks terrible and it smells like paint, but like you do have to feed it and keep it alive. And I think somehow that's where I position myself with a lot of this repertoire, is like I'm not singing it to displace anybody or to take a job from anybody else, but like if in 20 years these songs are still stay active in some kind of collective memory because we watered them and fed them, then I feel like that's a valuable contribution. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, but also like I'm building a tiny human inside my body right now. So that's kind of
Congratulations.
thank you. That's kind of like my current big project. And
I'm really excited
Peter's
for her.
Peter's really supportive of, Peter's good friends with the father of the tiny human. So
Actually, he was in Slavic Soul Party, so we were roommates. We would always be together in the band.
So anyway, so there's a family baby coming. But so I mean, I think it definitely changes the way I imagine traveling. But I think that's one of the things about being friends with the people that you work with is that you can kind of plan things around what's important. And I think for the two of us, we're not a festival band. So I think really like my goal is about bringing what we do to new audiences, but also bringing it into listening rooms. Not thinking of music as entertainment, which is so unfortunately how also Roma musicians have been treated for so many years, but really like elevating something and giving it breathing room and bringing it into intimate spaces like this, where people come and they're prepared to listen and they want to learn and they want to come along with you. They don't just want this like entertainment. And so I think that's in terms of how I think about where we go next. That's where I envision. I mean, almost like how is this not chamber music?
It's a chamber.
We're in a chamber. There's just two of us. It's different every time. It's responsive, and I think it's about. People love to talk about the collapse of genre, and I'm like, okay, you want to collapse it? Let's collapse it. These are songs of human experience, and we need not other them. We can show how they're relevant. We can show, and if I can play a role in that translation, then I think, that'll be good life's work.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the beautiful concert and for this wonderful interview.
Thank you so much.
Been a pleasure.